Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Auto Remarketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and senior editor of AutoFin Journal and Subprime Auto Finance News. Pleased to welcome for this episode of the podcast someone who's been in the car business his entire life as he and his family built the largest Chevrolet store in Virginia. And now he and his team at Vantage Point are working with dealership owners throughout Virginia and across the country to resolve disputes, compliance issues, and risk mitigation in a fast, thorough, and cost-effective manner. And now he's making time for us here on the Auto Remarketing Podcast. Please welcome Mr. Tom Kline. Tom, it's great to have you. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Nick. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Very good. Well, just to start out our conversation, it's amazing. A month of 2023 is already in the books. What's your overall assessment of what the auto retail landscape is like for dealerships nowadays? Just from your vantage point, from years of experience and current observations, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's really kind of two divergent things going on from what I'm hearing from my dealers. Some are still knocking it out of the park, and some are very much in an expense tightening mode. It really depends on kind of which franchises and the locations, but it seems to be two different things happening both at the same time, both the exact opposite.
Interesting indeed. Well, little deeper dive into one of the areas that is among your specialties, Tom. Some of those dealers might think that federal regulators, in particular, that the CFPB, the FTC, whomever, are just too busy to come look over at my store. Just why might that be some foolish thinking, perhaps, on the dealership's part?
Yeah, so an ounce of prevention is still worth a pound of cure, even today in 2023. That never goes out of style. All of the regulatory bodies, including the state attorneys general, have increased their enforcement activities significantly over the last 12 months. Just this morning, the state of Massachusetts fined a dealership group $350,000. The AG in New Hampshire in December fined a dealership group $1.25 million. Last year, the FTC fined Passport Automotive $3.3 million, Napleton $10 million. There was a dealership group in California that was fined $27 million. So some of these are, I would call, nuclear verdicts. Enforcement activity is increasing, and most of it generally starts with unhappy customers, and they go and complain to the regulators, and that's where a lot of the problems start. Both unhappy employees and customers. Generally, regulators are motivated to come in when they've heard complaints, and so that's usually how it all starts. So anybody who says that there's the regulatory environment is the same as it was, I don't think has been reading your publication or any of the other auto publications that are out there. The activity continues to increase. The FTC has proposed new rules, which everyone is still waiting to hear on whether they're going to be approved. That in that regard to advertising regulations. And of course, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which some of it was to be completed by January 10th of 2022. There was other parts that were supposed to be completed by December 9th. The FTC pushed that back to June 9th of 2023. So there are more proposals, more regulations, and more enforcement all at once.
Active times. Indeed, from the regulator standpoint, and I like how you described all of those actions against some really large dealer groups, some noteworthy actions to say the least.
If a regulator comes into your store, they're going to find things. There's no there's no way if you at a dealership, or for that matter any business, if you shine a light on any one thing, you're going to find things wrong with it. And it's just a matter of whether you have the right governance, risk, and compliance program at your store in order to say, hey, this one item may be out of whack and we'll take care of this one item, but don't tell us that we're willfully non-compliant, because here's all our policies, here's all our procedures, here's all the training we do our employees, here's where they sign off on acknowledgement when they do the training, here's our compliance audits, here's what they reveal, here's what as a result of those compliance audits, here's the new policies we put in place, here's the documentation of all this, right? If you can demonstrate you're doing all that, then you might have to write a 4-figure check, but it's not going to be a 7 or 8-figure check.
Big difference, to say the least. Again, the voice you're hearing is Tom Kline, whose firm at Better Vantage Point works with dealerships to resolve disputes, compliance issues, and risk mitigation. And Tom is going to be among the experts on hand for the Auto Intel Summit, which is coming up beginning on April 18th in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our shop is pleased to host this event for the 6th year in a row. More details are at autointelsummit.com. And Tom, we're glad that you'll be a part of the festivities again this year. If you could just give a little preview of what you might be sharing with our attendees coming up in April in Raleigh.
Yeah, sure. I'll give it away a little bit. I mean, we want to let them know what we're doing. The working title at the moment is How Regulators Do What They Do and Why You Should Be Concerned About Regulatory Oversight. So during the session, we're going to talk about what a regulator is, how problems start, what you can do to prevent those kinds of issues, and kind of generally overall, what is governance, risk, and compliance. And then we're going to take a page out of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, literally a picture out of their book. And they have an 1,800-page procedure book, and we're gonna talk about that one book because it talks about pre-examination and then examinations when they come into stores and how they communicate conclusions and what required corrective action that you might have to take as a dealership or as a finance company, and then monitoring. They're going to monitor your activity and what that's going to look like. So that's kind of a skeletal presentation of what we'll be talking about.
Excellent. Again, that's Tom Kline of Better Vantage Points, just one of the many experts who's on the docket for the Auto Intel Summit, which begins April 18th in Raleigh, North Carolina. More details at autointelsummit.com. And Tom, if you could, before we close out our episode, how can dealerships who don't already work with you and your shop get in touch with you at Better Vantage Point, and how can you be of service to them?
Sure. You go to my website. My phone numbers and email address are all over that. My phone number is 757-434-7656. Email address is tomk@bettervantagepoint.com. In brief, what I do is governance, risk, and compliance. So our corporate motto that was patented with the trademark office is, we get you out of trouble and we keep you out of trouble. So we work to make sure that the dealership is in compliance with all the myriad of rules and regulations. And then we design risk strategies around your compliance activities to make sure that if a regulator comes in or if a lawsuit comes in, that you have a way to transfer that risk. And risk transference comes in many different forms, but basically it's, do you have a policy or a procedure to handle these problems? And or do you have an insurance policy that may cover some of these items? Some of these items are insurable and some of them are not. And so we'll do a deep dive and to make sure that you are well covered when it comes to any of the potential problems that businesses run into when they do run into problems.
That's Tom Kline of Better Vantage Point. Tom, thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Auto Remarketing Podcast, and look forward to seeing you again coming up in April at the Auto Intel Summit. Thank you again, sir.
Thanks so much. I'll see you in a couple months, and invite everyone to come to the conference. It's a great one that I enjoyed, and I'll look forward to it as well.
Thanks so much. And as getting back to the podcast, if you've missed any of our past episodes, just go to our website at autoremarketing.com and click on the podcast box to find our library of past episodes. Or just subscribe through whichever platform you get your podcast. For our fellow hosts, Bill Zadites and Joe Overby, as well as our outstanding executive producer, Matt Rice, I'm Nick Zulovich. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time on the Auto Remarketing Podcast.